There was a time when watching Hulk lose to Thanos felt like the ultimate statement of power in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It happened so quickly that most of us barely had time to process it. The strongest Avenger, the unstoppable green monster who had smashed Chitauri armies, Leviathans, Ultron bots, and practically anything standing in his way, was overwhelmed within seconds. Thanos didn't need the Infinity Stones. He didn't rely on cosmic energy or reality-altering abilities. He simply outclassed Hulk with pure skill, confidence, and overwhelming strength. For years, that fight became the benchmark for what true dominance looked like in the MCU. Every time a new villain appeared, fans instinctively compared them to Thanos because nothing else had managed to make Earth's mightiest heroes feel so helpless. But now, standing on the edge of Avengers Doomsday, Marvel seems ready to redefine that benchmark once again. Because imagine replacing a brutal fistfight with something even more terrifying. Imagine the God of Thunder throwing everything he has into a single attack, Stormbreaker charged with divine lightning, Thor flying forward with absolute determination. Enough force to split armies and challenge Titans, and then the attack simply stops. Not because it was dodged, not because it missed, but because the man standing in front of him casually raises two fingers and the weapon refuses to move another inch. No explosion, no struggle, no dramatic effort, just complete control. Suddenly, Hulk losing to Thanos doesn't feel like the ultimate humiliation anymore. This feels infinitely worse. That's what makes this moment so fascinating. It isn't just about Thor failing to land a hit. Marvel has shown Thor surviving stars, fighting gods, defeating Hela's armies, and nearly killing Thanos himself. Stormbreaker isn't just another magical weapon sitting in Asgard's vault. It was literally forged to kill the Mad Titan. This is the same axe that sliced through a fully powered Infinity Gauntlet blast, something almost nobody believed was even possible. When Thor throws Stormbreaker, the expectation isn't whether it will hit. The expectation is that whatever stands in its path is about to be destroyed. So, when Dr. Doom freezes that attack in mid-air, as if the laws of physics have simply stopped applying, Marvel is communicating something far deeper than power scaling. They're telling the audience that Doom doesn't belong in the same category as previous villains. He isn't stronger because he punches harder. He isn't more dangerous because he shoots bigger energy beams. He's terrifying because he changes the rules of the fight itself. The moment Thor realizes his strongest attack means absolutely nothing, the battle is already over. That's why the expression on Thor's face matters more than the weapon. For perhaps the first time in years, the God of Thunder doesn't look angry. He looks genuinely uncertain, and if Thor the Avenger who has faced Celestials, Titans, and gods starts warning everyone about Dr. Doom, maybe we should be paying attention. The natural question is obvious. How does someone reach this level? Is Dr. Doom simply another sorcerer who learned a few forbidden spells? Is he just Marvel's version of an evil Doctor Strange? At first glance, that comparison sounds reasonable. Both characters understand mystic arts, both manipulate supernatural forces. Both possess knowledge that ordinary humans could never comprehend, but the similarities end almost immediately. Doctor Strange approaches magic with discipline. Every spell has rules. Every ritual demands precision. Every dangerous spell carries consequences that must be respected. Even when Strange uses dark magic, there's hesitation because he understands the price that comes with borrowing power from forces beyond human understanding. Doom, however, sees the entire concept differently. He doesn't respect magic. He doesn't worship it. He doesn't ask for permission to use it. He believes magic exists to be conquered. If a demon possesses power, Doom doesn't negotiate. He captures it. If an ancient entity guards forbidden knowledge, Doom doesn't politely seek enlightenment. He takes what he wants. That's the difference that makes him so dangerous. Strange studies mystical laws. Doom rewrites them to benefit himself. One seeks balance, the other seeks complete control. It's a philosophy that perfectly reflects Victor Von Doom as a character. To him, dependence is weakness. If your power comes from someone else's approval, then it can also be taken away. Doom refuses to accept that limitation, which is exactly why his abilities become so frightening. That mindset actually begins long before Victor ever puts on the iconic metal mask. Unlike many Marvel geniuses who rely entirely on science, Doom grows up surrounded by something far older than technology. His Romani heritage is deeply connected to mysticism, ancient rituals, and dark witchcraft. Stories about curses, spirits, forbidden knowledge, and supernatural forces aren't bedtime tales in his world. They're part of his reality. From an early age, Victor understands that the universe contains invisible powers far beyond ordinary human comprehension. But while others would spend a lifetime respecting those forces, Victor becomes obsessed with mastering them. Curiosity turns into ambition, ambition turns into obsession, and obsession eventually transforms into absolute certainty that no force in existence should remain beyond his reach. That's where Doom separates himself from nearly every other magical character Marvel has introduced. Loki was raised among gods and learned deception through illusion. Wanda's chaos magic awakened through unimaginable trauma. The masters of the mystic arts dedicate years to disciplined training before casting even their most advanced spells. Doom learns from everyone, steals from everyone, improves upon everything, and refuses to limit himself to any single tradition. He doesn't believe there should be boundaries separating science from sorcery, because in his mind, there's simply two different languages describing the same reality. Once you understand both, you stop following the rules that bind everyone else. This hybrid philosophy is exactly why Dr. Doom becomes one of the most intellectually dangerous characters Marvel has ever created. Tony Stark revolutionized engineering. Reed Richards understands the deepest scientific principles of the multiverse. Doctor Strange protects mystical balance. Individually, each represents the absolute peak of a specific field. Doom refuses to choose between them. He takes advanced technology, layers ancient enchantments over it, modifies mystical principles through scientific logic, and then improves the final result until it becomes something entirely new. It's not magic replacing technology. It's not technology replacing magic. It's both evolving together into a weapon no one else fully understands. That's why calling Doom a wizard feels incomplete. Calling him a scientist feels equally inaccurate. He exists in the space where both disciplines overlap, creating solutions nobody else would even imagine attempting. For Doom, magic isn't sacred. It's another resource waiting to be engineered. Technology isn't limited by physics, because mystical energy can remove those limitations. Every system becomes another tool inside a larger machine designed for one purpose: making Victor Von Doom impossible to defeat. The terrifying part isn't simply that he possesses incredible knowledge. It's that he continuously improves every source of power he encounters until it belongs exclusively to him. Now think about the visual language Marvel appears to be using with Doom's armor, because it quietly explains why Thor's attack never had a chance. Most viewers naturally focus on the metal itself. After all, iconic armor has always been associated with durability in the MCU. Iron Man depends on engineering. Black Panther trusts vibranium. Asgardian weapons rely on Uru, but Doom's armor isn't impressive because of what it's made from. Its greatest strength comes from what has been carved into it. Across the armor's surface are mystical runes, symbols that immediately remind longtime Marvel fans of one of the most overlooked magical mechanics introduced during WandaVision. Agatha Harkness explained a deceptively simple rule. Within an area protected by another witch's runes, only the creator of those runes can cast magic. At the time, many viewers assumed this was a clever trick designed specifically for Wanda's story. Looking back now, it may have been Marvel quietly teaching audiences a magical rule that would become much more significant later. Imagine Doom applying that exact principle directly onto his armor instead of a rune. Suddenly, His suit stops being passive protection. Every engraved symbol becomes an active magical system. Every inch of metal becomes enchanted territory under Doom's complete authority. When Stormbreaker collides with that armor, it isn't crashing into steel. It's entering a domain where Doom controls the mystical laws governing the interaction itself. That's an entirely different kind of defense, and it's exactly why brute force suddenly becomes meaningless. Once you begin looking at Doom's armor through that perspective, an incredible pattern starts to emerge. Marvel has spent years teaching us that every legendary weapon has a weakness somewhere. Captain America's shield can eventually be shattered. Mjolnir was destroyed by Hela with nothing more than one hand and absolute confidence. Even the Infinity Stones, objects once believed to be the fundamental pillars of existence, could ultimately be reduced to atoms. Every source of power in the MCU has always followed some kind of limitation. Dr. Doom, however, has never been interested in building stronger weapons. He's interested in eliminating limitations altogether. If magic can reinforce technology, why settle for ordinary armor? If enchanted runes can continuously strengthen a protective barrier, why rely only on physical durability? And if mystical energy can automatically respond to danger before the wearer even reacts, then combat itself changes completely. Thor isn't trying to overpower a man anymore. He's trying to overpower an entire magical system that has already predicted exactly how an attack like Stormbreaker should be handled. That's a terrifying difference because it means Doom doesn't necessarily need faster reflexes than Thor. His armor is already thinking several steps ahead. The battle is decided before Thor even swings the axe. Comic readers have witnessed versions of this idea evolving for decades, and that's where Dr. Doom becomes almost frightening to study. His armor has never remained static, because Victor Von Doom never stops improving it. Every defeat becomes another lesson. Every encounter with a stronger opponent becomes another opportunity to upgrade himself. Unlike Tony Stark, who often designs new suits to counter specific threats, Doom modifies himself with one goal in mind: to become universally prepared. Some of the darkest comic storylines push this philosophy to horrifying extremes. There are versions where Doom sacrifices everything that once made him emotionally human in exchange for greater mystical power. Jealousy, obsession, and his endless rivalry with Reed Richards slowly consume every remaining piece of compassion until even unimaginable acts become acceptable if they move him closer to perfection. One infamous storyline explores the horrifying idea of Doom creating armor infused with powerful mystical properties born from unbearable sacrifice. Whether every detail of those stories eventually reaches the MCU or not is almost secondary. The important part is understanding what they reveal about Victor's character. He has no line he refuses to cross. If knowledge requires sacrifice, he'll make it. If power demands morality be abandoned, he'll abandon it. Every horrifying decision becomes logical once perfection becomes the only goal. That's exactly why Dr. Doom's magic feels fundamentally different from characters we've already met. Loki manipulates perception. He makes you question your own senses. Wanda reshapes probability itself until reality begins bending around her emotions. The masters of Kamartaj carefully construct glowing eldritch spells through disciplined movements learned over years of relentless practice. Every magical tradition has its own recognizable visual language. Doom ignores all of them. He studies each system, extracts what makes it effective, removes everything he considers inefficient, and rebuilds it into something uniquely his own. Imagine someone learning every martial art on Earth, not because they respect those traditions, but because they want to invent a fighting style no one has ever seen before. That's essentially what Victor does with mysticism. He refuses to belong to any magical school because belonging means accepting someone else's rules. Doom doesn't want rules. He wants absolute freedom. That's why his spells rarely resemble anyone else's. They're unpredictable because they were never designed to fit within established magical traditions. Every incantation, every enchantment, every ritual becomes another component in an ever-expanding arsenal that only Victor truly understands. This also explains something that many viewers instinctively noticed about Doom's presence, but couldn't quite describe. His power doesn't feel loud, it feels inevitable. Think back to Doctor Strange's biggest battles. There's constant movement, hands tracing intricate circles through the air, sparks flying across portals, defensive shields forming in rapid succession. Even Wanda, despite possessing overwhelming chaos magic, often channels her abilities through visible emotional intensity. Her magic feels explosive because it reflects her internal struggle. Doom is the complete opposite. His confidence eliminates unnecessary movement. When Thor charges directly toward him with Stormbreaker, Doom doesn't brace for impact. He doesn't step backward. He doesn't prepare a dramatic spell. He simply raises his hand, almost as if stopping Thor requires no more effort than brushing dust off his shoulder. That tiny gesture communicates something words never could. True superiority rarely looks dramatic. It looks effortless. The less Doom moves, the stronger he appears because the audience subconsciously understands what Marvel is implying. If this level of power requires almost no concentration, then what happens when Dr. Doom actually starts trying? That visual storytelling immediately reminds many fans of another unforgettable MCU moment. When Hela caught Mjolnir with one hand before crushing it into fragments, audiences weren't shocked simply because Thor lost his hammer. They were shocked because the impossible suddenly became possible. For years, Mjolnir represented certainty. Once it was thrown, nothing stopped it. Then Hela casually reached out, held it in place, and destroyed one of the MCU's most iconic weapons without visible effort. It wasn't merely an act of strength. It was Marvel rewriting everything viewers believed about Asgardian power. Dr. Doom stopping Stormbreaker creates a remarkably similar feeling, but there is one critical difference. Hela was an Asgardian goddess with a direct connection to Odin's power and Asgard itself. Doom isn't defeating Thor because he possesses the same divine heritage. He's accomplishing something comparable through knowledge, preparation, and absolute mastery over forces that most characters barely understand. That's even more unsettling because gods are expected to perform miracles. A human accomplishing them through sheer intellect sends a completely different message. Doom isn't powerful because he was born special. He became this dangerous because he refused to accept human limitations. Of course, as soon as footage like this appears, fan theories explode across the internet. One of the biggest ideas people immediately jumped to was Magneto. After all, Stormbreaker contains metal. If Doom somehow acquired Magneto's abilities, then stopping the axe in midair might seem relatively straightforward. On the surface, it's an interesting theory, especially because comic readers know Victor has never hesitated to borrow, steal, absorb, or manipulate powers belonging to other extraordinary beings. Throughout Marvel history, Doom has stolen abilities from cosmic entities, challenged gods, and repeatedly found ways to claim powers that were never supposed to belong to him. The famous Secret Wars storyline alone demonstrates just how terrifying Victor becomes once he gains access to higher levels of cosmic energy. So the speculation isn't unreasonable. Dr. Doom absolutely has a history of making other people's powers his own. But if we slow down and examine what Marvel is actually showing us, another explanation becomes far more convincing. The biggest clue isn't Stormbreaker itself, it's the color of the energy surrounding Doom during the confrontation. Marvel has spent years creating distinct visual identities for different power sources. Wanda's chaos magic burns with deep crimson. The masters of the mystic arts generate brilliant orange eldritch energy. Loki's illusions carry unmistakable shades of emerald green, though they function very differently from true offensive sorcery. Dr. Doom's energy appears as an intense mystical green that doesn't behave like magnetism at all. Instead of simply pulling metal toward him, it envelops the entire interaction as though an invisible magical force is rewriting the conditions of the battle. Stormbreaker isn't being physically held in place the way Magneto might restrain a metallic object. It looks as though reality itself has decided that the weapon simply cannot move forward. That's a subtle but incredibly important distinction. Marvel seems to be emphasizing that Doom isn't relying on borrowed mutant abilities in this moment. He's demonstrating the terrifying ceiling of his own mystical power. And if that's true, then this scene isn't showing us a villain using someone else's gift. It's showing us what Victor Von Doom has become through his own relentless pursuit of absolute mastery. That realization completely changes the way we should look at Stormbreaker itself, because this isn't just another enchanted weapon that happened to fail. Ever since Avengers Infinity War, Stormbreaker has almost carried an aura of inevitability. Unlike Mjolnir, it isn't protected by Odin's worthiness enchantment. We've seen Thanos hold it. Steve Rogers used it without any mystical restriction. Even Gore was capable of wielding it during Thor, Love, and Thunder. So technically, Stormbreaker isn't looking for a worthy soul. It's looking for someone capable of controlling its overwhelming power. And in the hands of Thor, that power becomes catastrophic. This is the same weapon that pierced an energy blast generated by all 6 Infinity Stones simultaneously. Think about that for a second. The combined force of the Infinity Gauntlet represented the most concentrated source of power the MCU had ever introduced, and Stormbreaker still forced its way through. That single moment permanently elevated the axe into a completely different league from almost every other weapon in Marvel history. So when Dr. Doom stops it with what appears to be almost effortless precision, Marvel isn't diminishing Stormbreaker. They're elevating Doom. The weapon hasn't become weaker. If anything, it remains exactly as terrifying as it's always been. The only difference is that the man standing in front of it exists on a level where legendary weapons no longer dictate the outcome of a battle. And that's exactly where this scene quietly tells us something important about Thor as well. It's easy to watch a hero lose and assume the story is trying to make that hero look weak. Marvel has occasionally fallen into that trap before, where a new villain overpowers an established character simply to create instant credibility. But this moment feels fundamentally different because Thor isn't fighting recklessly or holding back. He's doing exactly what every fan would expect him to do. He's meeting overwhelming evil with overwhelming force. There isn't a smarter move available. There isn't another hidden weapon waiting to be revealed. Thor genuinely believes Stormbreaker is enough because until now, it always has been. That's why the humiliation lands so effectively. It's not the failure of Thor's judgment, it's the collapse of certainty itself. For years, Thor represented the final answer whenever the Avengers faced an impossible enemy. If Captain America couldn't solve the problem and Iron Man couldn't engineer a solution, eventually Thor arrived carrying enough raw power to shift the battlefield. Dr. Doom forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. What happens when raw power stops mattering? What happens when the strongest Avenger discovers that strength alone no longer solves the problem? The answer may actually lie inside Victor Von Doom's philosophy rather than his abilities. Most villains throughout the MCU are driven by desire. Thanos wanted balance. Ultron wanted peace through extinction. Kang sought control over time. Even Hela wanted to reclaim the empire she believed belonged to her. Doom is different because he genuinely believes that no one else is qualified to save reality. That's what makes him so compelling. In Victor's mind, he's rarely the villain of the story. He's the only person intelligent enough, disciplined enough, and determined enough to make the impossible decisions that weaker leaders refuse to make. Every conquest becomes justified because it creates order. Every sacrifice becomes acceptable because it serves a greater future. Every act of cruelty transforms into necessary leadership. That's an incredibly dangerous mindset because it removes hesitation entirely. Heroes constantly question themselves. They wrestle with morality. They wonder whether the cost is worth paying. Doom almost never does. The moment he concludes that something benefits his vision of the future, the decision has already been made. There is no guilt, no uncertainty, no second thoughts. That's why defeating him becomes far more complicated than simply overpowering him. You're confronting someone whose greatest weapon isn't magic or technology. It's absolute conviction. Now imagine placing a character with that mindset into the chaos of the multiverse saga. Suddenly, every strange event we've watched over the last several years starts looking like an opportunity instead of a disaster. Incursions threaten entire universes, timelines fracture beyond repair, variants appear from realities that should never intersect. The TVA struggles to maintain order after the collapse of the sacred timeline. To most heroes, these are crises that must be prevented. But what would Victor Von Doom see? Opportunity. If reality is already breaking apart, then perhaps it doesn't deserve to be restored exactly as it was. Perhaps it should be rebuilt into something stronger, something more efficient, something under the guidance of someone brilliant enough to eliminate the mistakes that created this chaos in the first place. That's why Doom has always fit so naturally into stories involving multiversal collapse. He's one of the few Marvel characters capable of looking at the end of existence and seeing the beginning of his greatest achievement. Where others see catastrophe, Victor sees raw material. Comic readers immediately recognize where this philosophy eventually leads because one storyline towers above almost every other Doctor Doom story ever written: Secret Wars. This isn't simply another crossover where heroes and villains exchange punches before everything returns to normal. It's a story where the multiverse itself collapses under the weight of endless incursions, leaving fragments of destroyed realities scattered across existence. Out of that unimaginable destruction rises Battleworld, a patchwork planet built from the remains of countless universes. And standing at the center of that impossible world is Dr. Doom, not as a king in the ordinary sense, but as a god. The terrifying part isn't that he wears a white cloak or sits on a throne. It's that millions of people genuinely believe he created their reality because, from their perspective, he actually did. History belongs to whoever survives long enough to rewrite it. Doom doesn't simply defeat his enemies in Secret Wars. He reshapes civilization until an entirely new generation grows up believing his rule is the natural order of existence. Whether the MCU adapts every detail of that story or chooses its own path, the direction feels impossible to ignore. Marvel isn't introducing Doctor Doom merely to replace Thanos as the next powerful villain. They're introducing a character whose greatest strength is that he can stand beside gods, geniuses, sorcerers, mutants, cosmic beings, and multiversal entities without feeling out of place. He belongs in every conversation because he understands every battlefield. If the conflict is technological, he competes with Reed Richards and Tony Stark's legacy. If it's mystical, he challenges Doctor Strange and Wanda. If it's political, he rules nations. If it's cosmic, he isn't afraid to confront beings who shape reality itself. Very few Marvel characters possess that kind of range, and that's exactly why a simple image of Stormbreaker frozen between Doom's fingers carries so much narrative weight. It's not teasing one impressive action sequence, it's announcing that every category of power we've relied on for nearly 2 decades may no longer be enough. And perhaps that's the most exciting part about revisiting the MCU before Avengers Doomsday. Moments that once looked like the absolute peak of power now feel like stepping stones towards something even greater. Hulk losing to Thanos taught us that brute strength has limits. Thor nearly defeating Thanos proved that even cosmic power can be challenged. Wanda showed us reality itself could bend. Loki revealed that time could be manipulated. Kang demonstrated that entire timelines could be controlled. But Doctor Doom represents something even more unsettling: the possibility that one individual can study every one of those forces, understand them, combine them, and ultimately rise above them through relentless ambition alone. If that's truly the version of Victor Von Doom Marvel is bringing into the MCU, then Thor stopping to warn the universe isn't fear, it's experience speaking. Because after facing gods, monsters, titans, celestials, and the Mad Titan himself, the one enemy capable of making the God of Thunder hesitate might also become the one enemy the Avengers have never truly been prepared to face. If that's the future waiting for us in Avengers Doomsday, then stopping Stormbreaker with 2 fingers was never meant to be the main event. It was simply Doctor Doom's way of introducing himself.